Good evening. I'd like to welcome you to the East Hempfield Township Board of Supervisors meeting. And I have a little statement to read first, and then we're going to get on with the main agenda items. With the governor's COVID-19 orders, large assemblies in Lancaster County are not permitted in the green phase that we are now in to include public meetings without proper social distancing and following CDC guidelines. However, the second-class township code requires us to meet, and the Sunshine Act requires those meetings to be public. To meet all three of these somewhat conflicting rules, we are conducting, and I apologize, I thought I had muted that. Let me mute that. And if you can mute your phones too and not follow my example. To meet all three of these somewhat conflicting rules, we are conducting a hybrid in-person meeting and a virtual public meeting. Today's meeting has been advertised to be held in person, modified to 25 in attendance, and online using Zoom, with login and call-in information posted on our website. If you're calling into the meeting, I'd like to encourage you to remain on the call, but to also go to the Township website by Googling East Hempfield Township and to log into our Zoom meeting following the instructions on our home webpage. Tonight's video and audio is being recorded. For tonight's meeting, Robert's rules will still apply, and the meeting will be run by the chairman, who will be assisted by an employee managing the Zoom site. Everyone on Zoom will have their microphones muted in order for the audio to be heard clearly. During the meeting, both those present and online, only one person at a time speaks, and they must be recognized by the chairman. Many people speaking at the same time combined with background noise makes meetings like this impossible to hear on Zoom. This rule will be strictly enforced. For people utilizing Zoom, you'll need to use the chat function to be recognized by the chairman. To be recognized with the chat function, you must be either a presenter who's on the agenda or a resident or business owner in East Hempfield Township who wishes to comment on an agenda item, where you must text your name and address. Your request to speak will then be passed on by staff to the chairman to be recognized. The steps to speak utilizing Zoom are simple. Request recognition by the chairman via chat to speak. Once recognized by the chairman, unmute your microphone. After receiving recognition, speak, and when done speaking, mute your microphone. For Zoom, any violations of the mentioned rules will be deemed to be acting out of order, and your microphone will be muted immediately without warning. Continued violations will result in you being electronically removed from the meeting. Robert's rules apply for those attending the meeting in person. All voting tonight will be done by roll call vote to ensure all votes are properly accounted for. Roll call will be conducted by the township manager. There will be no action taken on any non-agenda items of a non-emergency, non-urgent nature that arise during the meeting. All such items will be referred to staff and will be handled at a later meeting. East Hempfield Township's public comment rules will apply for all public comment. You must be a resident or business owner of the township to speak. You must identify yourself by name and address before speaking and sign the guest log for the meeting minute purposes, or follow the chat procedure already discussed for Zoom attendance. Comment is limited to 3 minutes and must be about an agenda item being discussed, with the exception of public comment at the end of the meeting for non-agenda items. No actions will be taken during public comment period for non-agenda items, with all issues referred to staff. We ask for your patience and understanding as we strive to continue serving the residents and businesses of this township while fully complying with social distancing requirements prescribed by our governor. So with that, we will now move on to our first agenda item. Please join me for a moment of silence and the pledge. Now the pledge. Pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
You may be seated. Well, I'm highly encouraged by all the people in the audience I see tonight. It's a lot of friendly faces, and I'm glad to have our police department here in force. Our first item of business is actually the swearing in of Christian Omar Torres Garcia. And with that, we'll turn it over to Chief, and I will have the oath of office here with me.
Real briefly, I know that you got a memo, but I just wanted to point out some things. Christian Torres is 36 years old. He currently lives in E-Town. born in Puerto Rico and then moved to Newark, New Jersey when he was about 12 years old. He came to our country not speaking English. English is his second language. He now speaks better English than I do. He's been employed at LGH as a phlebotomist technician for a number of years. Prior to that, or after that, he worked at Hempfield Township as a police officer for a little over 2 years, and managed to lure him to East Hempfield. And he's going to be a great benefit to us, and very proud to have him here. So he actually started work on Monday, but before he can go out and do police work.
I, Christian Amar Torres Garcia. I, as a police officer. Constitution of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Laws of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Laws of the Commonwealth. And the laws and ordinances. And I will discharge the duties of my office with fidelity. I will uphold, obey, and enforce all without national orientation, I will shake hands. Also, Forrest, you come back for our first meeting, you come back up.
We're going to work on the East.
Memorize the moment too on your. Again, it's great that we're hiring another police officer.
Mr. Russell, if you could use one of the microphones, please. Thank you.
It's great that we have another officer coming on board. And it's also great to see everybody here tonight. I know it's, for the policing community, the last couple of months have been tough. And unfairly so, in my opinion at this point. A couple bad apples and everybody's getting thrown into the mix. I think that's wrong. I've been very passionate about that. Chief and I have had a lot of conversations and a lot of frustration about everything that's been occurring. You guys do an awesome job. You serve this community very well. I'm proud to be a supervisor of this township and have you guys as the police department. Know that this Board of Supervisors has your back at this point, and we will do everything to promote policing and strong policing and community policing that we've been doing to date. You have an awesome chief. We have full confidence in this police department and everything that you guys do, and I'm proud of everything you guys do. I just wanted to personally relay that to you. Like I said, it's frustrating with everything that's been occurring and a couple of bad apples and a couple of city police departments dragging everybody else down. And when 99.9% of the police officers are doing an outstanding job. So with that, just know that this board has full confidence in what you guys do, and we'll
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, the East Hempfield Township Police Department.
Typically, the second reason we're here today is
Microphone. Thank you.
Someday we won't have to do Zoom. I hope it's soon. Uh, Typically, we present awards and recognize employees during the month of May. But as Mr. Russell alluded to, this has not been a normal year. But we kept pushing this off to a time when we could all be here at the same time. And I don't know when that's going to be. But these guys, because they wear a uniform, they're kind of thrown into the heap, and we're all been vilified by certain sections of our society. So we did not want to push this. I did not want to push this off and not do this year. So we felt it was very important to come together, even if we have to wear masks, most of us, even if we have to have 25 people in the room, we still wanted to get this done. So tonight we're going to present the annual Officer of the Year Award. This award is selected from nominations from fellow employees, and anybody can be a nominee, and anybody in the department is allowed to nominate somebody. In addition, we want to recognize employees who received a total of 41 awards during the last year and a half, up until about 2 weeks ago. And although we don't have time to discuss the details of each one of those awards, I felt that it was important to let you and everybody in the community know that our officers do outstanding work day in and day out. The circumstances in these awards range from anywhere from using a tourniquet to save a life, use CPR, Narcan, to arrests involving numerous defendants, stolen vehicles, things like that. And again, there's 41 of them, so I can't go over all of them. But I asked Lieutenant Poley to come forward and actually give a synopsis of what we did this year.
Thank you, Chief. Microphone.
You can hold it.
Like the chief said, good evening, everybody. Like the chief said, we have 41 awards that were awarded throughout since 2019, and I'm just going to summarize them with the officers and employees who received them with their names and a brief description of the award. So it's in alphabetical order. So we have Officer Stephen Armstrong, who received 1 unit citation and 2 first aid commendations, all in May of this year. Detective David Bender, who received a unit citation in May of this year. Officer Kyle Brown, who received a first aid commendation in August of last year. Lieutenant Brubaker received 2 separate unit citations, 1 in May of 2019 and 1 in May of this year. And Officer Tyler Clisham, who received a unit citation in May of this year. Officer Brian Dillplane, 2 unit citations, both in May of this year. Officer Ethan Etter, a unit citation in May of this year. Officer Richard Gauk, a unit citation in May of this year. Margaret Gaiman, who is one of our non-sworn employees, received a unit citation in May of last year. Officer Jordan Geisler received a first aid commendation in March of last year. Detective Ryan Kelly, a unit citation in May of this year. And then Officer Andrew Kranasik received a total of, this is pretty impressive, 5 first aid commendations between August of last year and June of this year, 5 of them. That's very impressive. And then Amanda Lenhart, who's another one of our non-sworn employees, received a unit citation in May of last year. Sergeant Anthony Lombardo received first aid commendation, 2 first aid commendations and 2 unit citations between March of last year and May of this year. Lieutenant Marsh, who retired in April, received a unit citation in May of last year. Lynn Martin, one of our non-sworn employees, received a unit citation in May of last year. Officer Matthew Miller received 3 unit citations and a first aid commendation between March of last year and May of this year. Officer James Pete, 2 first aid commendations from December of last year and then May of this year. Officer David Shannabrook, a unit citation in May of this year. Officer Jason Skiles received 2 unit citations, both in May of this year. Officer Matthew Spittler, a first aid commendation in May of this year. Officer William Watt, a merit citation and 2 unit citations between May of last year and May of this year. And last but not least, Officer Benjamin Weaver, a first aid commendation in December of 2019. So like the chief said, it's with 41 awards here. This is an illustration of the good work that our people do on a daily basis. So I'm proud to be able to read these names to you and illustrate what a good job everyone's doing. Thank you.
The Officer of the Year Award is the Kenneth Nidinger Officer of the Year. It's presented to the officer. And the way that our nomination form reads, it says it's regardless of rank or assignment. That means anybody in the department get it, from an aide, a clerk, all the way up to the chief. Best exemplifies the department's sworn personnel during the year. The selection is based upon professionalism and exemplary service during the previous year. Every officer should come to work on a daily basis feeling that they're worthy of being selected based on their performance throughout the year. But only one officer is chosen each year. This year, Officer Brian Dillaplane is a recipient. I ask Brian to come forward.
I'm going to drop the mic about a foot since I'm about a foot shorter than Lieutenant Poley. But I present to you Brian Dillaplane. Brian is a respected member of the department who has a positive attitude and strives to better fellow officers. Brian has 17 years of law enforcement experience. He became a valued asset to East Hempfield almost 5 years ago. Brian previously served with East Calico for 12 years and had been employed as a part-time police officer in South Heidelberg Township and Western Berks County Regional PD in Berks County as well. In addition, he has served with several fire departments in various leadership positions, including fire chief. He also was an EMT. In 2019, Brian was in the top of the department for criminal arrests, vehicle code prosecutions, and warnings. He's proactive in all facets of police work and is always willing to take on additional work and responsibility. His paperwork is top-notch and serves as an example for other members of the department. He can always be counted on to handle whatever is given to him in a thorough, professional manner without complaint. He's a valued and trusted employee who we rely on to provide field training to new officers, as well as being a leader and a mentor to officers. Brian participates in various traffic details to include aggressive driver and buckle up. One of Brian's best qualities is humbleness. Due to his experience and time on the job, his guidance and direction is relied upon and respected by members of this department of every rank. Again, he's been with our department for 5 years, but his 17 years of law enforcement experience has something to say about him, and the fact that he came to our department makes us proud to have him here with all of his knowledge and experience. Brian is also community-minded and takes part in various events such as Cub Scout, Boy Scout tours, Coffee with a Cop, Pops with a Cop. He embraces what this department stands for, which is community police. Has that in his mindset day in and day out in his daily patrols. He's also a respected crime scene and evidence technician. Brian provides leadership on the Lancaster County Forensic Unit. He has been tasked with responding to major criminal incidents in various municipalities throughout the county to assist with processing crime scenes. In 2019, he was involved with 2 homicide cases where his talents were instrumental with the investigation. Because of his training and experience in serious crimes, he is able to pass his knowledge and skills on to all of our officers. The term well-rounded police officer describes Brian. Based on his consistent, excellent work product, efficiency, and dedication to service, Officer Brian Dillaplane has been chosen as the 2019 Officer of the Year.
That's okay. I get it. You're gonna make him do a speech? Thank you.
Yeah.
I again just wanted to publicly work every day, you know, I'm gonna knock on wood, but these people all stayed healthy, they did, they took care of themselves, they took care of their families, they came to work every day. And I can't ask for a better place. I want you all to know how lucky, how fortunate you are, how fortunate the residents. Thank you.
Know again that the board knows that and knows how much value each one of you bring to this community. How important each one of you are at this point. I know I'm not speaking in the microphone right now, but know that you guys, each one of you represent this township, and we are proud to have each one of you in this community. And I would put our police department up against anybody at this point. It's the best in Lancaster County and Pennsylvania. Thank you for the job that you guys do. And I don't know if any other board members have anything that they would like to say.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I also want to say thank you. You are an outstanding group. I've gotten to work closely with Chief over the years. And as been previously stated, our board supports you 100%. As we celebrate the hiring of Officer Garcia, and we recognize our Officer of the Year, Officer Billaplane, we should also acknowledge that these past few years, there has been a sustained and a coordinated effort to make police officers out to be the villains, to try to cast the blame for society's ills and the shortcomings of our leaders and the failure of our leaders onto a group of individuals trying to make our community better. It is truly hard to understand. In recent years, law enforcement officers have come under attack nationwide. They have been unfairly criticized, mocked, assaulted, and even murdered. When you look at our officers, or any police officer, there is more than just a uniform. They are husbands, fathers, wives, mothers. They are our neighbors. They are the person sitting next to us at church. They are Little League coaches. And as you just heard tonight, they're also Boy Scout leaders. They are good citizens that care for our community. They are our friends. So let's be determined to spread that perspective as we leave here tonight. I again ask you, fellow board members, to show our support for the men and women who stand up for us every day by standing up for them now. Thank you.
The only thing I'd like to add to that is just thank you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. I've lived in this township for 40 years, and my kids live here, my grandkids live here, and I am unbelievably pleased to have you all providing the public safety in this township. Thank you very much.
Nothing to add. Thank you, Mr. Wigglesworth, Mr. Bennett, Mr. Russell. Nothing to add.
Can't say it any better than they did, so I agree. But thank you.
Thank you very much for the kind words and thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you. You're all welcome to stay if you would like to see a thrilling public hearing, or you're welcome if you want to leave now too. I don't blame you if you want to run. So thank you for coming. And with that, we'll conclude the best part of the evening, and we'll move on to the more mundane part of our business. So next up we have on our hearing, or on our agenda, is a public hearing for the village residential and village commercial zoning text amendments. We do have our solicitor present. This is possibly something that we could take action on after we conclude the hearing. It is an action item later on in the agenda. So with that, we will open up this hearing, and I guess maybe we turn over to Mr. Beck to start off with and explain what we got here and the findings of the Planning Commission and such like that. So I open the floor up to Mr. Beck.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Staff prepared the proposed amendment for the village residential village center zone in order to preserve the character and history of the villages Roarstown and Landisville. Throughout the past few years, we have seen developments come in that are degrading the character and in some ways the history of those two villages. One of the key issues that was addressed with historic properties, considering that the highest concentration of historic properties in the township are located in Roarstown and Landisville, is to control demolition of those properties. Therefore, the proposed ordinance lists requirements that any property owner or developer that wishes to demolish a historic property or structure within the village residential or village center zone must come before the Board of Supervisors for conditional use. Additionally, some other main points of the village residential and village center amendment. The density requirement that was specifically required in the zoning ordinance was removed. One of the reasons was it was in contradiction to the minimum lot size requirement. And in order to ensure density, lot size is the way to control density. Therefore, new lot sizes are proposed for residential and other uses in the village residential village center zone. For example, residential properties will require 8,700 square feet per dwelling unit of lot area. So that whether it's a single family detached, a duplex, a townhome, or a multifamily development project, each of those uses will require 8,700 square feet per dwelling unit. I'd like to highlight multifamily developments. That does not mean that a multifamily development can go on a property that is 8,700 square feet. That means for every multifamily unit or every dwelling unit in that multifamily building or development must have a minimum of 8,700 square feet. So if you have 10 units that you're proposing, then you're going to have 87,000 square feet of lot area. One of the reasons we changed the lot area requirement was not only to address some of the issues with density, that was a byproduct. The main reasons are for proper development to ensure that when properties are demolished for appropriate reasons, that redevelopment of those lots is consistent with the board's comp plan and the comprehensive plan for the township. Additionally, Landisville and Rohrerstown are riddled with stormwater management problems. A minimum lot size of 3,000 square feet, which is what the current ordinance requires for a residential property in the village residential or village center zone, is too small a property to properly accommodate stormwater facilities for all the impervious area that is known to go on a lot. For example, a house that has a 1,500 square foot footprint, you couple that with parking requirements to make sure that the property has off-street parking requirements, or better yet, some amenities like a shed or a patio, and you slowly eat up that 3,000 square feet and are left with very little area to accommodate stormwater management. Furthermore, traffic. Rohrerstown is probably the most heavily trafficked area in the township. In an effort to preserve history and character is also to control the growth in Rohrerstown and in Landisville, and to ensure we get proper development that can accommodate the current infrastructure that we have. On Zoom is Scott Hain, and I asked Scott Hain to please fill in if I missed anything or to provide any other highlights that he would like to point out. Scott Hain and Nick Ebersol from David Miller Associates were the principal people involved in drafting this ordinance with staff's help. Scott Hain is from Liddittsboro and offered insight on the conditional use requirement for historic properties in Landisville and Rohrerstown. So at this time, Scott, if you could, I would appreciate you adding to any of my comments.
Thanks, John. I think the key things that you said were really to preserve the historical character of those two villages. And that was the main intent of the changes that we made with the ordinance. I know we don't take lightly the addition of conditional use to the board's agenda and requirements. It's not something you typically want to add, but in this case, if someone would come in to want to tear down one of these properties, that gives you sort of a significant level of control of what happens in that case. If you agree part of it could be torn down, maybe none, but it really puts that back onto the board, the ability to control what those structures look like. What we didn't want to have happen was somebody come in and buy 2 or 3 adjoining properties, simply tear them down and then maybe build a block of townhomes or do something like that, where it was really inconsistent with, again, that character, what we keep talking about of both of those villages, and trying to preserve that. As John mentioned, we did use portions of other ordinances, in particular the Liddittsboro ordinance within their historical area, how they used the conditional use as a tool to help preserve those properties in that area. And I've seen it implemented on, I think, maybe 5 or 6 cases already, and it's been, I feel, successful in that application. So we felt that it was something that would work in these very specialized areas, not across the broad township by any means, but in these specialized areas of the township that have that specific nature. I'd be open to any questions if you have those too about what we worked with staff on with developing this ordinance.
And if I may, gentlemen, I'd like to provide, first, the Township Planning Commission did recommend approval. There were quite a few comments regarding this, and I know Mr. Wigglesworth and I believe Mr. Bennett had participated or attended via Zoom the July 8th Planning Commission meeting. It was a little contentious, but ultimately they did end up making a recommendation. They were concerned with some, in my opinion, some minor points that could be addressed with a later amendment that would fix those minor issues. Mr. Garinger had pointed out the lot size requirement, a couple other things. Additionally, the County Planning Commission provided their comments. We received them August 11th. And the County Planning Commission took some liberties with their review. They do not agree with the amendment. They are concerned that reducing the density in the residential village center zone is going against the county comp plan, Places 2040, which makes a recommendation to have a minimum of 9 dwelling units per acre for the central Lancaster County urban growth area. Under the proposed ordinance, the density in the village residential and village center zone would be 5 dwelling units per acre. Some of the Planning Commission members actually agreed that having 9 dwelling units per acre will actually destroy the villages of Rohrerstown and Landisville because of that increased density. It will increase the likelihood that prospective developers or speculative developers will come in and build to those higher densities, destroying the essential character of Rohrerstown and Landisville, demolishing historic structures. They commented on the maximum size of convenience stores and lowering the maximum size of grocery stores. The ordinance lowers a convenience store size from 5,000, or I'm sorry, the max size of convenience stores from 5,000 to 6,000 square feet, and lowering the maximum size of grocery stores from 45,000 feet to 10,000 square feet. And again, I believe the County Planning Commission is missing out on what a village is. A village is not a place for a big box store. 45,000 square feet is what you get with a, and I use the term loosely, a small giant or small Wise. For comparison, the Lidl that is being built and will soon open later this year is 25,000 square feet. A 10,000 square foot 10,000 square foot grocery store is an appropriate size to serve the residents of that village. It is not necessarily to serve a regional population, and that goes along with a convenience store. The board passed a convenience store portion of amendment that addressed convenience stores, and 5,000 square feet is typical of most convenience stores. 10,000 is where you're getting up to a truck stop or a larger convenience store that is not necessarily in compliance, or I should say, does not necessarily fit with something that you would see in Rohrerstown or Landisville. They commented on reducing lot coverages from 70% to 50% unless pervious paving materials and landscaping plan are used. 50%, and it entices people to use pervious paving materials, developing a operations and maintenance plan, and encourages them to use landscaping plans to get a higher lot coverage requirement. Right now, 70%, I'll use the 3,000 square foot lot coverage, 70% of that, 2,100 square feet, 3,000, you're left with 900 square feet of open space if they can go to 70%. It doesn't make sense for preserving open space, for allowing for stormwater management facilities and passive and active recreation facilities. In the end, the County Plan Commission recommended the board deny the proposed amendment. And the reasons for it: supplying of housing units, they want to increase the diversity of housing units, particularly multifamily. They are against the fact that the township is reducing the density in currently the highest dense or the most dense zoning districts in the township. And they had encouraged the township to look at ways of going up instead of out. And with that, if there are any questions, I'm sorry, one last thing, we did receive some public comments. I'm going to start off with those that we received that were opposed. The main themes of those were: the people were concerned that the amendment will reduce or eliminate affordable housing in the villages. And if you gentlemen remember, this comment came right after the LCPC article, the LNP article, right before the LCPC meeting. And a lot of things were taken out of context in that article. A lot of things were factually incorrect. The next one was: reducing density in villages will encourage suburban sprawl and development outside of the urban growth areas. And I will close with the one public comment I don't think I've ever gotten in my career. Thank you for reducing density in Rohrstown, and disagrees with the LCPC comments. With that, gentlemen, if you have any questions or anything like that, Scott Hain and I will be happy to answer them.
Okay, so we'll now turn it over to the board for some deliberation. Is there any comments or questions of the board members?
I just had one question as far as the density. So if this goes to 5 per acre, that's, well, obviously just about 1/4 acre lots, which, are there any other zones? I mean, I guess what I'm trying to say is I'm not against density as its places. Some places it works, some places it doesn't. Do we have any places in the township where we are encouraging higher density, like 7, 8, 9, other than previously Landisville and Rohrstown? Like, what's our high-density residential zone, I guess?
The villages are our high-density residential zone. Even with 5 dwelling units per acre, would still be the most dense zones. However, we do have cluster developments which offer higher density in the low-density residential and the medium-density residential. And off the top of my head, I don't have it in front of me, I believe they can go up to 6 dwelling units per acre.
It's a cluster, so it's really, if you look at the entire site, it's really not that dense. It's probably probably 3 or 4 at the most.
Correct. It's encouraging development to maintain enough open space.
Right. So I like the demolition. I think that would probably go a long way to preventing what the concern is with the historic structures being torn down. So have there been cases where that's happened, or has there been developers looking to tear down historic buildings?
It's
come from, I wonder.
we have not had that I'm aware of. Maybe Cindy can help me out here. An instance where a historic structure that is on the township's historic register or the county, state, or federal register has been demolished. It's extremely difficult to do that.
Yeah.
But we do have a number of properties that are older and are of a unique architecture. They just don't meet the criteria to be placed on the township historic register, county, state, or federal register. And we have seen instances where people have demolished those, and some they've gone through the steps, and for the most part, they were severely deteriorated, and demolition was in order. I haven't seen any yet where the township had any issue with something that was a little bit older, that might be considered historic, that was demolished.
Okay. So I guess generally, I like the demolition regulations. I did work for the county for 13 years, and I was probably indoctrinated somewhat with the density is good part of it. So I tend to, I'm not anti-density, I'm not super pro, but I think if we're going to do more dense development, that would be the place for it. So that's just my comment.
I would say that I think the primary driver for this is with the real estate market heating up over the last few years. Mr. Beck indicated a few of the situations that had occurred. And you basically, a neighbor's waking up one morning who's lived next to one family for 30 years, and now he has 7 different apartments next door to him. And there was little warning for that to happen, and we had very little control over the process in doing that. So that's the primary driver behind the amendment or the text change, I think, today. And I think it is important to preserve the character of Landisville and Roarstown. And with the way things are currently, my belief is if we don't pass this, you're going to see several more of these come in the next few months. Just because it's been out there publicized that we're considering it, and it's going to be profitable to buy 2, 3, 4 of these units in a row and maximizing the density that we currently have in the ordinance now. So I think we only had one resident that actually officially wrote in, but I was contacted by a few different people who did have a concern with the density. And I think over the years, we have heard that. Regarding the affordable housing comment, because that was raised as well, I think we should recognize there's affordable rentals and there's affordable real estate purchases. And I believe it was the 2016 study, correct me if I'm wrong, any of the other board members who are familiar with that, in which East Hempfield had above the amount of rental units in our township. We were ahead in that area. Where we were lacking was affordable real estate home ownership. And again, I think this ordinance or this text amendment goes to protect that. If we do nothing and we stick with the status quo, it's not going to be home ownership. It's going to be apartments and bedroom community. And I believe the Planning Commission recognized that almost immediately, that that's what's going to take place. So I do think, even though the density is being reduced, you're keeping home ownership, affordable home ownership in these 2 locations. And we do have an abundance of affordable rental units in East Hempfield.
I will corroborate, since I participated in the comprehensive plan development, which is what you were citing. And one of the things that came out of it was that we exceeded the county's goal for apartments and affordable apartment rentals, which a number of our other municipalities around the city of Lancaster have not met that goal. So I do take a little bit of charging with what the County Planning Commission was saying, because we already have a significant housing stock of apartments in this township. And we did add an affordable housing apartment complex right next to this township building. That falls under Landisville. So what we do have a shortage of in the township is exactly what you stated, which is first-time home buyer properties. And those would be on the small lot, single homes is what is desirable, and quite frankly, when one of those go on the market, they go quickly. So there was two, my son takes piano lessons, and the piano instructor lives right next to the high school in Lancaster. And two of those properties went up and they were gone within 2 days of listing. Because they're affordable, they meet people's price range, close to the good schools, and that's what people are looking for, and that's what we kind of lack. The other thing is, we really don't have too much land left to develop for residential. That's Mr. Beck a while back, how many lots we really have, and we're down to, you can count on one hand of open lots that are left to develop. Basically, we've come to the point where everything in this township is developed residentially. We do have some commercial tracts, some industrial tracts that are still left to develop. But for the most part, we kind of have hit the development wall where we're getting at the point where we just got to manage what we have in this township. Other municipalities around us still have a lot of open space within their urban growth boundaries. Ours has developed following the county guidelines over the years. And now it's time for us to manage it. And I look at this ordinance as managing, protecting what we have. There is a trend with certain people that buy properties to rent them, to run them into the ground. And we saw that, and that led to the CVS being developed on Centerville when all those rental properties were run into the ground. And the goal is not to let that happen, and to make people actually do the maintenance and the upkeep that's required to maintain a building, and not let it to be just an asset that can be used until it no longer has any remaining life left in it. So one of the things is to prevent that from happening. There's a lot of beautiful housing stock along Lancaster and in Roystown. I'm supportive of it for those reasons.
Well, I basically have two comments. First, I'd like to thank the staff. I think they've done a good job in balancing all the different pieces of this puzzle with respect to the community feel, the economics, and the character of the neighborhood. I want to support what Mr. Russell said about the housing stock in general. I personally like to see that we encourage home ownership. There is a place for rentals in every community, but I would like to see home ownership encouraged to whatever extent possible in the zoning that we do. And I think this ordinance has done a good job to do that. So I'm going to support it.
Well, I see a positive in retaining the character of these villages for all these residents of the villages, so that they don't have a situation where their home that they value for its Victorian style, if you will, has something very modern going next to it and changes the whole picture, the whole streetscape, the whole character of the neighborhood. And I believe this goes to trying to preserve that for the whole community.
So this is a public hearing. Now, if there's no more board comments, we will open it up to public comment at this point. We'll start off with in the audience here, very few people in the audience, but if anybody has any public comment that they would like to offer related to this ordinance, now's the time. You just have to state your name, need to be a resident or a business owner or property owner in the township, and you can provide your comments. And right now, most of the people I'm seeing are members that are on other layers in agenda, but please state your name and your address, please.
Sure. My name is Alan Landis. I live at 429 Roarstown Road. So am I good?
Yep, you're good. That's perfect. Yep.
My ID. I actually forgot my wallet in the car, so I was a little worried about that. Okay. Dear Supervisors, thank you for providing me the opportunity to provide public comment on the proposed changes to the village zoning amendments. I am a lifelong resident of Roarstown and 2 properties in the village zones. I've reached out to many of you and expressed my concerns about the amendments via email. I'd like to thank Scott for hearing my concerns and attempting to provide more reasoning behind the changes. Township staff also met with me and tried to provide additional justification for the changes. Unfortunately, I've yet to hear rational explanations for the many changes within these amendments or see supporting analysis that justifies the specific adjustments and identifies the potential impacts to East Hempfield residents. I should note that I will be focusing my comments on the aspects of the amendments aside from the density requirements, which have been discussed. I do support the County Planning Commission's vote of disapproval because it's inconsistent with the county's density goals. But through my engagements thus far, I've been told that the primary intent of these amendments is to preserve the historic nature of the village zones, and that there have been recent multifamily developments along with proposed multifamily developments that are not consistent with the character of the village zones. This has apparently come from residents in the village zone, so I'm glad to hear that those concerns are being heard and addressed. But I think we should be clear that these changes go far beyond attempting to limit new multifamily dwellings on single-family lots. Cutting the density allowance in half, limiting lot coverage, limiting the building area for multifamily, and restricting the ability to demolish structures are all going to more than adequately address the issue of large multifamily dwellings taking over the village zones. The additional requirements and limitations, including restricting lots to one principal residential use, increasing lot width requirements, and limiting business uses to lots larger than a half acre, are unnecessary to mitigate the multifamily issue that's been raised. These additional changes will essentially remove any ability for current residents to make the most of their property and to ultimately accomplish the original intent of the village zones. The zoning ordinance currently states that the village center zone recognizes the original residential, commercial, and mixed-use settlement pattern within its village areas, and this established pattern of development includes higher intensities of development that integrates a mix of businesses and residential uses. The zone provides opportunities for redevelopment, infill, and reuse of existing, particularly historic structures. But for the many single-family homes sitting on Roarstown Road and Merida Avenue in Roarstown, it's unclear how they're supposed to have mixed uses of homes, businesses, and apartments and fulfill that intent of the ordinance with these restrictions. Removing the ability to innovate and make the most of their property use will restrict almost all these properties to single-family homes, homes that happen to be along the busiest intersection in the county. It's just going to lower property values. The reality is that the historic nature of the village has already been disrupted. Constant traffic and intense business and residential development within a mile or two surrounding the Roarstown village can't be ignored. We can't have it both ways, allowing significant development around the village and expecting homeowners impacted by that within the village to accept further restrictions on the properties in order to maintain the historic nature of the village. It's inconsistent and unfair to those residing in those areas. I understand we have to adapt at times to make changes as appropriate, but changes to the zoning ordinance have real consequences for homeowners and residents in East Hempfield. When people buy a home, they are typically purchasing the biggest and most important asset of their life. The township is proposing these changes that will impact the value of that investment. Yet there was no engagement with residents and homeowners in those zones or an opportunity to provide input on how best to address the situation, with the exception of the comment period that I'm discussing right now. Additionally, there's no published public analysis that justifies the specific changes being suggested or identifies the scale of the impacted properties. Township staff cited their expertise in dictating the specific changes within the amendments. I recognize the expertise of the township staff, but in the spirit of transparent and thorough governance, as not an adequate explanation to the residents that they serve. For example, the restriction that limits business use to properties larger than a half acre that is being justified as a stormwater management issue. I don't think the township can confirm that it is impossible for a property less than a half acre to conform with current zoning and stormwater requirements. The answer to that question is no, then it is an engineering issue, not a lot size issue. Further, as the township identified the number of properties that will be impacted by these changes, the amount of historic structures that will now be unable to be reused due to these restrictions, and how these changes will impact the fulfilling of the intent of the village zones in the future. From the evidence provided to me so far, it is clear that the original intent of updating these ordinances has morphed into something unrecognizable. That issue is compounded by the fact that these changes are being rushed through in a matter of months, while the original ordinance took years in the midst of the pandemic and economic recession that are limiting public participation. I request that prior to advancing these drastic changes, the township conduct outreach and solicit feedback on the proposed amendments from affected property owners. Additionally, I request that township conduct and publish analysis supporting that these proposed changes are the most effective way to accomplish the development goals of the township supervisors and East Hempfield residents. Thank you. I hope that wasn't too long. I thought it was a 5-minute period, not 3, so I apologize.
Ron, so far you're the only one interested in speaking, so you're good.
Okay, all right.
Thank you.
I guess I'll sign in, but thank you for the opportunity. I do appreciate it.
So is there anybody else in the audience that would like to speak before we turn to Zoom? Okay, seeing none, Ms. Garber, is there anybody on Zoom that would like to speak?
Yes, we have one resident that would like to speak. He's actually logged in twice, so I'm not sure which one is going to work to unmute him, but we'll do both and see which one. Mr. Ralph, you should be unmuted at this time.
Hi. I just have a quick question. Do the East Hempfield supervisors believe every township needs to do its part to increase housing density so we can preserve the rich farmland of Lancaster County? And follow-up is, if so, what is East Hempfield supervisors doing to increase some affordable housing in East Hempfield?
I'd like to. For me, the answer would be yes. I think it's pretty evident what we've done so far. As Mr. Russell indicated, we recently did pass a low-income housing development a few years ago. We have the tobacco warehouse in Landisville that's coming online. I believe that's anywhere from 80 to 90 units, somewhere in that ballpark. In addition, we have Park City Apartments. We have several apartment complexes along Marietta Avenue from Barcrest all the way up to Centerville Road. And again, we have several on Columbia Avenue as well. So I think we've definitely done our fair share to support it, and I think we will continue to as well. But I don't think that it's a binary choice that we can't support the county's effort to preserve farmland, and at the same time, we can also, we can support the county's effort to preserve farmland, and we can also try to preserve the character of our small villages as well.
Just to reiterate what came out of our comprehensive plan is we exceed the county's goal for apartments and multi-housing units. We fail in first-time homeowner affordable houses. So anything that can preserve small lot, single home units is actually helping comply with what's in our comprehensive plan right now. And most of our land has been developed at this point, so there's actually very little land left to develop. Okay, Ms. Garber, is there anybody else that wishes to speak?
There is not.
Okay. So seeing that there is no more to talk about, this was a public hearing, so we will need to, I guess I'm looking at our as solicitor, we will need to close the hearing. I did notice we normally do take action potentially on a hearing item, but it is not listed on our agenda.
It's not, the hearing is listed, but the actual action is not listed.
Right. But it's also something we could take action on too. I am cognizant that no ordinance is perfect. And one thing that East Hempfield has done a good job with is we constantly update our ordinances as real problems occur with something that we adopt. And trust me, when I look at you right now, that if there are things that need to be adjusted, there were things that we would take into consideration. That is something we've always done. And later tonight, we're going to be talking about sign ordinances and making adjustments to those because there's some unintended consequences that came from our zoning ordinance of 2015 or 14 at this point. It's been a number of years now where we need to talk about making some considerations about making some adjustments. And we're always open to reasonable changes and adjustments at this point. So with that, I will entertain a motion that we close this hearing.
So moved.
Okay, motion from Mr. Wigglesworth. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second from Mrs. Bennett. Mrs. Schweitzer, will you pull the board, please?
Mr. Weaver?
Aye.
Mr. Bennett?
Aye.
Mr. LaFever?
Aye.
Mr. Wigglesworth?
Aye.
Mr. Russell?
Aye, the ayes have it, 5-0. I will also entertain a motion that we add this item to our action items under agenda item number 5.
So moved.
Okay, motion from Mr. Wigglesworth. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second from Mr. Bennett. Ms. Schweitzer, please pull the board.
Mr. Weaver?
Aye.
Mr. Bennett?
Aye.
Mr. LaFever?
Aye.
Mr. Wigglesworth?
Aye.
Mr. Russell?
Aye, the ayes have it, 5-0. So with that, we will move on to our consent agenda. The purpose of the consent agenda is to approve routine items that usually require very little debate or discussion.
Before we move on, can I
Okay.
just want to recognize Mr. Landis. Oftentimes we have people come in and they just yell and scream and they really don't raise any good points. And even though what you said wasn't what you heard from us tonight was a disagreement from what you articulated, you did a very nice job of articulating your point. You were very respectful, and I appreciate that. And I want to echo what Mr. Russell said. We will reach back out to you, so thank you.
Okay, so with that, we'll move on to consent agenda. Is there any items on the consent agenda that anybody would like to discuss?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, the item of the JMS financial security reduction, as I read the items needing to be completed on that project, particularly the stormwater measures, erosion and sedimentation, and things that seem to have been, I'd say, blatantly ignored. I respect our engineer has probably used a matrix to determine his proposed reduction, but I think I would question reducing it as much as it is, which is basically 50%, very round mathematical numbers. I think holding more funds might get their attention and get those critical items of that site work addressed. And so I raised concern about the JMS final plan reduction.
Okay, and Mr. Lefevre, that's a valid point, but I also turn it over to our solicitor because there's also a legal component to that too. When it comes to security reductions, we do have certain obligations to reduce in a fair and equitable manner if the work has been done. So how would you interpret that?
I would rely on the
Okay, so is Mr. Haynes available?
Before Mr. before Mr. Haynes comments, because I think his comments are invaluable at this point to answer Mr. Lefevre's concerns, I'd just like to point out that some of the issues that you've brought up, Mr. Lefevre, were due to COVID halts in construction. They only recently were able to start construction back in the end of May. And so they have gotten done what they could because of the halt to the construction activities. With that, I'll leave it to Scott Haynes.
Yes, however, they asked for $54,000, which they were asking for something that in my general opinion was not complete. And that's where I stand taking exception.
Hello, this is Scott. I do agree that the project wasn't complete, and we have had some, let's say, issues during construction with plans changing and things maybe being built that weren't on the plans. So we've tried to work with this owner and developer to try and move this through the process. I think, as Mr. Russell mentioned, we do have a spreadsheet that we approved during the process when the plan is being approved that outlines all of the improvements that are part of the project. They have units of items and they have dollar amounts associated with them. We use that same spreadsheet when we go through and do the reduction, and we identify the items that have been completed, and then we propose those for reduction and then leave the other items. One of the things that we do is there's a 10% contingency that's part of each one of these securities. We do not reduce that 10% down proportionately as we reduce these letters. We hold that entire 10% to try and encourage that finishing of the project, as you had mentioned in your discussion. So we do try to work some things in, but again, we feel we try to be fair with our reductions and base them on the spreadsheet that the original project was done with.
So, Mr. Haynes, so basically the items that you're reducing have actually been documented as complete.
Correct.
Is that what you're stating at this point?
Correct.
And not everything is in a public security. So there could be parts of the project that are not complete, that are not covered by a security.
Correct, yeah. Items that weren't required by ordinance necessarily would not be held with security. So there will be some things on the site that aren't secured. Again, in our letter, we have identified some things that a lot of the issues have come from sort of changes that happened during construction as opposed to what was maybe part of the original plan. So we have worked with them to try and resolve that as we've gone on. But everything that we identify has been completed. Often a developer will provide their own version of a spreadsheet that says what they think was done. For better or worse, we don't really look too closely at that. We go out and use a sort of a neutral eye, look at the site compared to our version of the spreadsheet, and then make a recommendation. So that's how we came to this conclusion.
Does that suffice, Mr. Lefevre? Or?
I'll rest my case. However, I think we'll have challenges till this project is done. I'm seeing things in the tea leaves, if you will.
I respect that. And realistically, that is what the 10% contingency is for. It's not going to be a lot. And unfortunately, these securities are only for the public improvements, not for the whole project. So there's a lot of parts of the project that we can't necessarily tie the public securities to, even though they're not done. Okay, is there any other comments on the consent agenda?
Just one other quick comment. I don't want to diminish the importance of other departments within the township, but is there any way that we could break out, because of the number of issues that we have within the planning and development, is there any way that we could break that out onto a separate rather than a consent agenda? We put it somewhere else where it's a little easier to track what's going on and keep an eye on it. I mean, there's a lot of, or there's a number of issues in John's report that one provides some degree of controversy, I think, and just like to be tuned into those a little more directly. Nothing wrong with John's report. Just the issue I have is that it's in the consent agenda. I just maybe like it somewhere else on the meeting agenda.
Okay, we can certainly entertain that. I mean, the reports are, the reason they're on the consent agenda is for us just to read. There's really no action items, but if we want to actually, is there anything, like we do a manager's report where the manager provides an update on what the manager considers to be some critical items. Is that what you're looking for?
Yeah.
Versus, so.
Well, and then again, they can be moved maybe to the manager's report. I just think that we want to put a little more focus on the development side, planning and development. Just a thought.
I don't disagree because we had the issues we had. I just don't know if the report's it or maybe there's some other format. So why don't we think about that a little bit at this point?
Just wanted to bring it up. Thank you.
Okay, is there any other comments on the consent agenda? Okay, then I'll entertain a motion to adopt the consent agenda.
So moved.
Okay, motion from Mr. Bennett. Is there a second?
Second.
Second from Mr. Lefevre. Mrs. Schweitzer, please poll the board.
Mr. Weaver?
Aye.
Mr. Bennett?
Aye.
Mr. Lefevre?
Aye.
Mr. Wigglesworth?
Aye.
Mr. Russell?
Aye, the ayes have it, 5-0. Okay, now we'll move on to our actual action items. And the first action item we have is Lancaster County Motor Stormwater Management Plan for 5260 Main Street to approve modifications and waivers, the Stormwater Management Operation and Maintenance Agreement, and project financial security. Mr. Beck.
Mr. Chairman, I must recuse myself on this agenda item due to a part-time relationship with the owner.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For you gentlemen, is Lancaster County Motors has submitted a stormwater management plan. And as part of that plan, they are requesting 2 modifications. The first modification is, and this is based off of the David Miller August 10th, 2020 review letter. The first modification is for maximum loading ratio for volume control facilities and karst areas. The ordinance requires a 3-to-1 impervious drainage to infiltration area and 5-to-1 total drainage area. The applicant is seeking a modification of this requirement, is proposing a 5-to-1 impervious drainage area to infiltration area ratio and a 7.7-to-1 total drainage area to infiltration area ratio. DMA has reviewed this and they are recommending the modification be granted. They are also asking for a modification to the buffer planting strip requirements. They're proposing to utilize an alternative design option. And based on their justification, DMA is recommending that the modification be granted. Basically, they're in an area where they don't have a whole lot of space to put in the required buffer and screen due to stormwater management facilities and the proximity of the building to the lot lines and the neighboring buildings to the adjoining lot lines. There are already some fences and trees that are there, and that's part of their alternative design. The Planning Commission reviewed this and recommended approval of modification 1 and 2, and staff agrees with the engineer and Planning Commission and recommends the board approve modifications 1 and 2. Amanda Groff from Harbor Engineering is available via Zoom if any of the board members have any questions.
Okay, this is a rather routine approval, but is there any questions of the board at this point?
I have none.
Anybody from the audience? Ms. Garber, anybody on Zoom? Okay, seeing and shaking the head, no. So I'll read the two motions. The first motion is to approve modification request number 1 and number 2 for Lancaster County Motors Stormwater Management Plan, Township File 04-52-02, subject to staff and engineer comments.
So moved.
Okay, motion for Mr. Wigglesworth. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second for Mr. Weaver. Ms. Switzer, please poll the board.
Mr. Weaver?
Aye.
Mr. Bennett?
Aye.
Mr. LaFever?
Abstain.
Mr. Wigglesworth?
Aye.
Mr. Russell?
Aye, the ayes have it, 4 with 1 abstention from Mr. LaFever. Second motion is the operation and maintenance agreement and financial security. The motion is to approve the stormwater management operations and maintenance agreement to establish $99,556.27 as the project's financial security and to establish $1,017.69 as a stormwater management plan inspection fee and as a stormwater plan maintenance fee for Lancaster County Motor Stormwater Management Plan, Township File 04-52-02, subject to solicitor and engineer comments.
So moved.
Okay, motion for Mr. Wigglesworth. Is there a second?
Second.
Second for Mr. Bennett. Ms. Switzer, please poll the board.
Mr. Weaver?
Aye.
Mr. Bennett?
Aye.
Mr. LaFever?
Abstain.
Mr. Wigglesworth?
Aye.
Mr. Russell?
Aye, the ayes have it, 4 with 1 abstention from Mr. LaFever. Next thing we'll move on is 701 Stony Battery Road Final Plan, approved modification and waivers of the final land development plan. Mr. Beck.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. 701 Stony Battery Road has been before the board for past couple meetings. Most recently, the board approved the conditional use decision for this property. It was a modified conditional use, granting the approval for a heavy industrial use that is going to generate more than 50 large truck or tractor trailer deliveries per day. Part of this development located on Stony Battery Road, primary entrance. It'll be a approximately 250,000 square foot warehouse distribution building. The existing lot is about 18.75 acres. That currently has a house and other associated farm structures. The development will propose 182 parking spaces, 49 loading docks, and 54 trailer parking spaces. They will have 2 stormwater management basins along Stony Battery Road. The original conditional use application, the board approved back in October of 2019. And as I said, the amended one was approved earlier this month. The project is located in the enterprise zone and it's within the central Lancaster County urban growth boundary. Stony Battery Road is the municipal boundary for East and West Hempfield Townships. As part of the project being in the Lancaster County urban growth boundary, they are proposing a pedestrian walkway. It's going to be a bituminous trail. for the purpose of multimodal transportation, pedestrians and bikes. The applicant is requesting a number of modifications. If you want, I can go through each modification. If there's any specific ones that any of the board members have any questions with, I'll be happy to go over those. These modifications have been reviewed by staff and the township engineer. And township staff is recommending approval of those modifications, number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. The Township Planning Commission agreed with staff and engineer and also recommended approval of all 6 modifications. As far as the final plan, at this point, the developer and their engineer has worked tirelessly with the township through the last couple months, dealing with both the conditional use and getting the final approval for the project. And at this point in time, township engineer and township staff are recommending that the board grant approval of the final plan.
Okay, we do have the applicant's engineer here present tonight. I don't know if you have anything you would like to add at this point.
Good evening, Andy Miller with.
I know where you live, Andy.
Someone stole my address. Here on behalf of 701 Stony Battery Road Associates. I have nothing to add to John's presentation. He hit all the high points. I'd be happy to answer any questions about the waivers and modifications for the plan itself, even though we have reviewed it in quite great detail over the last several meetings regarding the conditional use.
Okay, any questions of the board? I mean, I read through the conditions. They are all kind of what we've already discussed at this point. Okay, seeing none from the board, I will now turn it over to any questions of the audience at this point. Okay, I'm seeing nothing from Mrs. Garber either, it looks like. Shake of the head no. Love technology. I'll read off the motions at this point. The motion is to approve modification request number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5, and number 6 for 701 Stony Battery Road Final Land Development Plan, Township File 19-08-03, subject to staff and engineer comments.
So moved.
Okay, motion for Mr. Wigglesworth. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second for Mr. Bennett. Ms. Schweitzer, please poll the board.
Mr. Weaver?
Aye.
Mr. Bennett?
Aye.
Mr. LaFever?
Aye.
Mr. Wigglesworth?
Aye.
Mr. Russell?
Aye, the ayes have it, 5-0. Next motion is to approve the 701 Stony Battery Road Final Land Development Plan, Township File 19-08-03, conditioned on resolution of all outstanding staff and engineer comments within 90 days of plan approval, unless extended by the board for cause shown, or plan approval will be null and void. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Motion for Mr. Bennett. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second for Mr. Weaver. Ms. Schweitzer, please poll the board.
Mr. Weaver?
Aye.
Mr. Bennett?
Aye.
Mr. LaFever?
Aye.
Mr. Wigglesworth?
Aye.
Mr. Russell?
Aye, the ayes have it, 5-0. Congratulations. We will be looking to call that trail very soon at this point with the development at the corner of Nolt and Stony Battery. And I can tell you that trail use has gone up pretty exponentially in the township. And I think given the busing situation right now for the Hempfield School District, there might be some appreciation to have a direct route right now for some of these developments to the school district instead of kids walking along the railroad tracks. So I think we will be calling in pretty quickly the trails.
Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank
Thank
you.
you.
Okay, next on our agenda is the 2260 Dairy Road Warehouse, approved modifications, waiver, and final land development plan. Mr. Beck, I'll turn it over to you again.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For you gentlemen tonight is a approval of modifications and a final plan for a warehouse distribution facility on Dairy Road. The proposed facility will be approximately 70,000 square feet at the address 2260 Dairy Road. will be served by on-lot water and public sewer. I bring this up because the applicant did reach out to Lancaster City Water, and unfortunately, there was some capacity issues and could not serve this property. So they did go through DEP approval to get on-lot water. Current lot has been used for an ag use. It's proposing 38 parking spaces, 6 loading docks, and 2 stormwater management facilities. The project site is located in the enterprise zone and the airport hazard overlay zone, and within the central Lancaster County urban growth boundary. The applicant's requesting 6 modifications. One for sidewalks. They asked for a waiver. Township staff and engineer believe that this waiver should be denied and a deferral be granted. They're asking for a waiver to the buffer planning requirements. Township engineer has recommended granting the approval with conditions. Same with the buffer planting strip. Due to the nature of our ordinances, the curb and sidewalk and pavement are covered under multiple sections, but the fourth one is in dealing with curb and sidewalk and pavement widening. And again, township engineer and staff are recommending that a waiver be denied and that a deferral be granted for curb and sidewalk. And the applicant has submitted a probable cost opinion for a fee in lieu of the road widening. And DMA's recommending approval with the condition that the applicant pay the fee paying the fee in lieu of prior to recording the plan. The fifth one is also dealing with curb and sidewalk. And again, DMA is recommending that the deferral request in this instance be granted. And again, mentioning the road widening fee in lieu of requirement. And the last one is a stormwater management waiver for to deviate from the maximum loading ratio for karst areas of a 3-to-1 impervious drainage area to infiltration area and a 5-to-1 total drainage area to infiltration area. And based on the justification provided, DMA has reviewed this and is recommending that the waiver for the maximum loading ratio be granted. Township staff have worked with the developer and his engineering team to discuss various issues, one being the traffic at McGovernville Road and Rohrstown Road, the replacement of the old Rohrstown Road Bridge, and improvements to Dairy Road. And the developer has agreed to provide a fee in lieu of $20,000. At this point, Mark Stanley, attorney representing the developer, is available on Zoom. I believe he has some things that he would like to present to the board on regarding this project. So at this point in time, I will turn it over to Mr. Stanley.
Good evening.
Good evening, Mark. Hi, Mark.
As John said, I represent Dairy Road Development, LLC. They're the owner developer of the site that is the subject of the land development plan. With me via Zoom is Glenn Prill, Mike Esterly, and Larry Prescott, all applicant representatives, and Kevin Ember and John Schick from Ritu Associates. Ritu is the project engineer and traffic consultant. The Planning Commission has seen and recommended approval of the plan and the modifications along the lines that John has recited. We are in receipt of the DMA letter number 3 dated July 24th, 2020, They address the modification requests, and it lists certain minor outstanding items that essentially are administrative in nature. We don't have any questions regarding the DMA letter. We also are in receipt of Chris Bauer's letter of August 14th. That was a result of some discussion back and forth between the applicant and township staff. Chris's most recent letter indicates that we have addressed the comments in his prior letter and ends with the phrase that he has no further technical comments on the traffic impact assessment. The applicant originally anticipated that this would go in front of the board last month, but staff advised us that they were asking that we address Chris's comments, which we did. Shortly after the scheduled July meeting, we reached out to township staff to discuss the review letters, discuss the project, and get a better understanding of the issues. We updated and submitted the traffic impact assessment. We also, based upon discussions with staff, reached out to our neighbors to our west because of some traffic concerns that we understand were raised with the board. We wanted to explain to our neighbors the proposed purchaser, the project, and the anticipated tractor trailer count. We've spoken to the neighbors on several occasions and met with one of our neighbors to discuss the project and provide him with copies of the plan. As John has put up on the screen, the prospective purchaser is Fillmore Container. Currently, they're located on Norman Road off of Horseshoe in East Lampeter Township. Fillmore is looking to relocate to East Hempfield Township on the site that is now known as 2260 Dairy Road. Essentially, Fillmore is a glass jar company. From a tractor trailer perspective, about 6 tractor trailers per day, 2 over the noon hour, 2 between 4 and 5, and the remaining 2 in between the 2. They do have wholesale customers who pick up product in panel trucks and smaller vehicles. In discussing both the site plan and the proposed purchaser with our neighbors, we found out the rumor or whisper down the lane was that there was plus or minus 100 tractor trailer trucks per day. When we explained the proposed use, the proposed purchaser, and the fact that we were looking at plus or minus 6 tractor trailers per day, the neighbors were very pleased. They were also very pleased that we reached out to them, took the time to discuss the project with them. Another issue, and I think the second issue that staff raised with us, is the possible reconstruction or replacement of a bridge or culvert to the west of Dairy Road, to the west on Dairy Road, excuse me. And after discussions with the staff and discussions internally with the applicant has agreed to contribute $20,000 to the township, which the township could use for engineering or matching funds in the future. And we would agree that the contribution would be made as a condition of the recording of the plan. We're looking forward to bringing this new company to East Hempfield Township. We look forward to continue to work with staff. As you see on the screen, looks like it's going to be a very nice building from a construction perspective. And we would ask for the board's action and approval on the modifications in the plan. If you do have any questions, our project team is here to answer any questions that you may have.
Okay, I will open up to the board. I personally have no questions, and I'm glad to have another industrial client moving into our township that's a low impact.
Agreed.
As am I. I am, however, a bit concerned about the traffic there at that spot. And I don't know, have an answer, but it is good to hear that we're only looking at 6 tractor trailer loads.
I will confess, I did request Cindy to send me plans of the bridge project. I did look it over because I didn't want to be saying things that might be incorrect. But what the bridge project is doing is it's shifting the bridge further, I guess it would be south and west of where it's located right now, putting more of a sweep curve in.
Okay.
And it's widening the roadway. Right now, that road kind of meanders underneath there and it's 20 foot wide. It's going to be 26 foot wide with a sweep curve and a much better intersection.
Okay.
So that, what that one resident brought up last month as a problem is a real problem. But I think what our project is doing is within the constraints of trying to pass underneath an Amtrak line and still have adequate clearance for the water that needs to go underneath. We have a project that's actually improving the roadway to the best possible manner. And the 6 trucks a day will be negligible compared to the improvement of what that project's doing. So I felt very comfortable when I saw that design. I let Cindy know that I was pleasantly surprised.
And just to
with
be
what was being
clear,
done.
the Old Roystown Road Bridge project, which you just described, is one project. The contribution of the $20,000 is actually for the bridge we just recently discovered had some issues and now has a weight restriction on it. And that's what we were encouraging the developer to provide some financial support to us, because that will eventually have to be replaced.
But back to that the original owner's issues and with his trucks and everything, I think once this project occurs, it's not a complete 100% fix, but it'll be drastically better than what's out there today.
Thank you.
Any other comments to the board?
It seems like it's in a good location. That's about all I got. Piece of land is just sitting there, so.
They're saying the neighbors is 283 in Amtrak.
Right, yeah.
You can't get better neighbors than that.
Of the land.
So, okay, so with that, there is absolutely nobody in the audience. Is there anybody, Ms. Garber, on Zoom that wants to talk or ask questions?
I don't see any.
I don't see, I can't see Ms. Garber to give her a shake of her head normally she would give at this point. Okay, so with that, we will then move on to taking action. So I'll read the motions here. The first motion is for the modifications. Motions to approve modification request number 6 and the request conditional approval for modification request number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, and number 5 as discussed for the Dairy Road Warehouse Final Land Development Plan subject to staff and engineer comments.
So moved.
Okay, motion for Mr. LaFever. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second from Mr. Wigglesworth. Ms. Schweitzer, please poll the board.
Mr. Weaver?
Aye.
Mr. Bennett?
Aye.
Mr. LaFever?
Aye.
Mr. Wigglesworth?
Aye.
Mr. Russell?
Aye, the ayes have it, 5-0. Next is the final plan approval. Motion to approve the 701, motion to approve the Dairy Road Warehouse Final Land Development Plan Township File number 07154-04, conditioned on resolution of all outstanding staff and engineering comments within 90 days of plan approval, unless extended by the board for cause shown, or plan approval will be null and void. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Okay, motion from Mr. Bennett. Do I have a second? Second. Second from Mr. LaFever. Ms. Schweitzer, please poll the board.
Mr. Weaver?
Aye.
Mr. Bennett?
Aye.
Mr. LaFever?
Aye.
Mr. Wigglesworth?
Aye.
Mr. Russell?
Aye, the ayes have it, 5-0. So Mr. Stanley and to Mr. Glenn Frill and everybody, congratulations, and please welcome your new client into our township with our gratitude. So thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Okay, next up is the advertisement for the Stobro sign amendment, otherwise known as Stoffers are Kissing Hill. So this motion is purely just to advertise The hearing would be on September 16th, Board of Supervisors meeting. I do know there are some concerns with it, but really the only thing that for this motion tonight is just to actually establish a hearing date at this time. So is there any comments of the board at this point?
Yes, sir. May we go to paragraph 8 of the proposed ordinance? And can we have it on the screen, please?
Give us just a second. I don't know if she had that queued up.
I don't think she has it.
She has it on the agenda.
Oh, does she? Okay.
Said number 8, I believe, Mr. LaFever.
Yes, that is it. Thank you. Second line reads, 2 square feet of building signage per 1 square foot of exterior building wall space. Think about that. 2 square feet of signage for 1 square foot of the exterior building. That's twice as much surface as the building side surface. I submit that should read 2 square feet of building signage per 1 lineal foot of the exterior building wall space. And that goes on to coincide with the example given where by mathematical calculation, they take the lineal feet of the building illustrated there and convert it to the square foot for the signage. Now, this is the third time in as many meetings that I've addressed this, and I can't get it changed. And I am sure that I am right. And I don't want this to go out for advertising with this, what I believe is an error. And then if we may go to paragraph 9, the next one.
Pardon me, Mr. LaFever.
Go ahead.
If I may, I don't mean to interrupt. But what you are looking at is the justification that Attorney Schenk had provided for the ordinance. It's not the actual ordinance that will be advertised. I do agree with you. There is a typographical error in that document. It should have been 2 square feet or 1 square feet for or whatever.
1 lineal foot. Well, why are we not looking at what's going to go out? We're talking about advertising a document and you're saying it's not the document we're going to send.
That document that was part of the petition. So we provided that. We did not get an amended copy. We provided that to the board for additional justification for the ordinance. But that particular area is not going to get advertised. That is not part of the ordinance.
Well, I'm not comfortable approving to send something out for an ad that I haven't been able to review because I don't know what else might have been changed. Now, if I may go on, look at paragraph 9. And in the last sentence, it reads the total area building signage. No, I'm sorry. It's in the third line. It says that the whole 360 square feet that this particular example building would calculate could go on one side of the building. That's ludicrous. It's insane. I don't know who prepared this, but for 3 times I've tried to get this addressed.
Mr. LaFever, if I may, if you go to the actual ordinance, which is an attachment.
On page 14 of the 72. On page 14 of the 72.
Is it? It's actual section 1E parentheses 2. It lists the requirements for building signs. And 2B is maximum permitted area, and I'm reading from the ordinance. Maximum permitted area, 2 square feet per 1 linear foot of exterior wall space, up to a maximum total sign area of 100 square feet per each exterior building wall space. So yes, her example does point out that the maximum area by calculation of 2 square feet per 1 linear foot would be 360 square feet. But the ordinance would limit the sign to any wall to be no more than 100 square feet.
I'm not sure where you're reading. I did not read it. I did not see it. So you have me confused.
But basically what Mr. LaFear, what Mr. Beck is saying is that was provided months ago when they did their petition. That's not what we take action on. There's actually, I'm not sure, it looks like it's page 13 and page 14 of the PDF is the actual ordinance that we're taking action on. And those issues that you brought up have been addressed in this ordinance. So that it does correctly state, flip here. I just saw it a moment ago. I just lost it here, but it is in here.
2B.
Under 2B, maximum permitted area, 2 square feet per 1 linear foot of exterior wall space up to a maximum, I'm about to lose my computer, up to a maximum total sign area of 100 square feet. That's the part that we're taking action on. The whole rest of the document was just part of what they originally submitted, but those are not items we take action on. So we don't take action on their narrative or their background or why they're here or any of that stuff. We're just taking action on these 2 very specific pages, which is the actual ordinance, which has corrected her narrative mistake when she originally submitted that.
All that I see at the following through this whole item on the agenda is a lot of historical signage information that I do not find what you're referring to.
Page 13.
13, well,
Yep. I actually confess that I didn't see that either, so I went to the top of the PDF and just saw what was previously submitted. I didn't realize that the actual ordinance was further down.
well, there's a lot of page numbers here. I'm still not able to find a page.
Keep going. Look at the page numbers are down there at the bottom.
Yeah, that's page
1,
2.
9, 10.
Now I lost pages. Now I don't have
Right there, right
pages.
there. That's it. Yep.
Oh, this is the new ordinance you're saying. All right.
Okay. So this, I mean, we are going to have a hearing. This is really just to advertise it. That 2 pages, that PDF page number 13 and 14 is the actual ordinance. That's what's being advertised. The rest of the stuff is just all background information, just like we would have for any other hearing. But those are not things that we don't take action on the background. We only take action on these 2 specific pages, which is the actual ordinance.
Well, I understand that. In my ignorance, I was not able to differentiate what was a previous ordinance and not finding, and I'm still not seeing any page numbers, but I'm willing to take the consensus of the board that what you're saying corrects the square foot, lineal foot, and limits 100 square feet on the side of a building. And if it does that, then I'm all right with it.
Yeah, I've just read it clearly, just to be honest with you, it does do that.
All right.
Okay, Mr. Bennett.
I'd also like to weigh in on a couple of things. First of all, I want to begin by saying I'm not opposed to what Stouffer's wants to do here. I spent some time this week with John in his office and reviewed concepts or their plans. So my issue isn't with that. My issue really is about the way we're doing this. I believe that generally the applicant has a burden to demonstrate that they cannot achieve what they want to achieve under our current ordinance. The applicant has been before the zoning hearing board 4 or 5 times with this type of request, and they've been successful, as I understand it, 4 or 5 times. The applicant, the other issues that I have with this is that the applicant is proposing a new zoning classification with conditions. I'm concerned about unintended consequences down the line of a text amendment change and a possible impact on other properties in the township. I know, and I think we all agree, that we need a comprehensive rewrite of our sign ordinance. There's no doubt about that. You know, I think it should be more, any update that we do should be more township driven. And rather than doing it piecemeal, which is what's going on with a lot of this, in the case of the Lime Spring development, I believe we did basically the same, or used the same approach was used here to accomplish what was necessary for that development. I personally believe that this should go before the zoning hearing board, and see what happens from there. I mean, they're just a couple of my concerns.
Okay, why not?
Sure. I mean, from my perspective, I think some of what Mr. Bennett had indicated tonight, those are all legitimate arguments, but it's all for the next step in this process. And I think if we just keep our eye on the ball, tonight is just advertising. It's not deliberation, it's not debate, it's not hashing it out right now. It's just advertising. So, I mean, I'm prepared to support the motion to move it forward for advertising. We could show up on the 15th loaded for bear and deliberate and, share our concerns then.
So are you making a motion?
Unless somebody else has more comments. If not, so moved.
Okay, the motion is to advertise. Really, I just would encourage, that's what the actual hearing is for, is because right now we're having debate or discussions and we're not really doing it in a public format. We're doing it in a public meeting. But that was in people that might want to offer comment are not here in the meeting right now. So I would really I get your concerns, I really do. And I get your written concerns with the language and the confusion of what the attorney put in originally versus what is in the final document right now. And I get the confusion of having 350 pages that we got in our agenda packet right now and how things can get missed. It's overwhelming the amount of information that we get starting Saturday and having the field through to get to this point. But I really would like us just to get this hearing set up, and then we have the debate and discussion at that point. So
There's no advantage to waiting.
well, if we gotten this far, the Planning Commission has done the review. They moved it forward 7-1 with their vote.
And in fairness to the applicant, they
And
did
the
submit the
applicant has
petition.
spent a lot of money at this point to get it to this point. They deserve a hearing and an up and down vote at this point.
So we're advertising this and then we will address it again after a month or so.
Well, it's almost a month. It's our second September meeting is when we're talking about conducting the hearing.
Well, I don't need to see the previous ordinance again.
Understood.
So the motion is just to advertise at this point and actually conduct the public hearing. We do not ever produce perfect ordinances. I've always encouraged our ordinances to be living documents that need to be updated periodically. We do have a problem overall with our sign ordinances. We have way too many zoning hearing applications that are related to signs. And when we have, right now, I think it was 25% of all of the zoning applications are sign related, give or take. Because I saw like 80 and it was like 19 or something like that. So it's pretty close to 25%. And that usually, when you have that many related to one subject matter, that usually means you have problems with your existing ordinance. This is not a perfect document. And I agree, it is kind of piecemeal. But I think we need to give them their due and have a hearing. So I do have a motion to advertise. Is there a second?
Second.
Second from Mr. Weaver. Ms. Schweitzer, please poll the board.
Mr. Weaver?
Aye.
Mr. Bennett?
No?
Mr. LaFever?
No.
Mr. Wigglesworth?
Aye.
Mr. Russell?
Aye, the ayes have it, 3 with 2 in opposition. So with that, we'll move on to our next agenda item. is the Woodcrest Villa dedication of maintenance access, Resolution 2020-27, and the deed of dedication. Mr. Beck, if you will
Thank you,
explain
Mr.
this one,
Chairman.
please.
Diane, could you put up the exhibit just for reference? Thank you. Ooh. On the screen is an exhibit for, at one point in time, was going to be the extension of Good Drive or the extension of, I can't remember the name of the,
Shriner Station.
Shriner Station, thank you. It was either going to be the extension of Good Drive going north or Shriner Station going south. However, after numerous discussions with McMahon and researching a proposal, even going up to PennDOT to meet with them to address considerations for the improvements at Good Drive and Harrisburg Pike, the cost would have been far more than any benefit we could have gotten to increase Good Drive to the north. We would have had to take additional right-of-way. We would have to put up a new traffic light, replace an existing mast arm, and the total cost would have been well over $500,000, which would have fell on the township. As part of a 2005 agreement that was executed between Woodcrest Villa / Mennonite Homes and the township, this area was to be dedicated for public right-of-way. But after discussions in the recent future, or the current time, it is now going to be a maintenance access. I say maintenance access because we discussed having this dedicated as an emergency access. And again, even as an emergency access, PennDOT would have required significant improvements that would have jumped the cost up to make it beyond beneficial. So this will be a maintenance access. That does mean, though, it will be barricaded off, so only township personnel can use it.
Question, Mr. Beck, is it plowable?
Yes, it is. It is improved to township specifications. It is paved.
That will address our being landlocked and having to plow that roadway, which is the
Yes.
whole main purpose of this.
Yes, Perry and Scott Hain, Perry went out and took a look at it. It meets his specifications, his approval. The police would have access just like Public Works and the fire department. In the event of an emergency, Public Works could go out there and open it up and allow residents from Shriner Station out down to Harrisburg Pike, but only in an emergency situation. And it's a maintenance access that can be used for emergency purposes, but it is not an emergency access, so PennDOT will not require us to make additional improvements to Harrisburg Pike. We have worked very well with John Souter from Woodcrest Villa Mennonite Homes, and he has had the assistance from RGS in preparing the exhibit, the legal description, and the deed of dedication. Due to the conflict of interest, we have used Stacey Brubaker Morgan, or Morgan Brubaker. She has reviewed the documents. They meet her specifications. The legal description has been reviewed by David Miller Associates. Everything is in keeping. And at this point in time, it is signed by John Souter Mennonite Homes, and it's ready for board approval. So at this time, staff recommends that the board adopt Resolution 2027, which would accept the dedication of the maintenance access from Woodcrest Villa and Mennonite Homes, and then accept the deed of dedication for the maintenance access.
Okay, any discussion of the board?
Can you just clarify for me again, why are we taking ownership of it? What's the purpose?
We have a landlocked public road.
Okay.
Basically, we cannot get our trucks and equipment across a covered bridge.
Okay.
So right now, correct me if I'm wrong, Perry, has to go through private property to access it. Plus, there was issues with flooding and other things where parts of our community can become trapped.
That is correct. And I don't know if it makes any point, but stormwater, the stormwater facilities run parallel to the maintenance access, and will accommodate our, will handle and treat the impervious from the maintenance access. So as Scott said, yes, the original purpose was to have a way to get people that are landlocked on Shriner Station Road and from the apartments out in the event of emergency, because right now they only have an access out to Montgomeryville Road.
So basically, it's a good thing. I mean, we basically, up to this point, have no real way of actually maintaining that roadway properly without going across private property. Any other discussion of the board?
I was just going to say that tonight at the Traffic Commission, we kind of discussed a similar case with the covered bridge. And that's the only King Post Truss covered bridge in the county, and it's, I think, the only white one, too.
And
So-
and it's also posted 3 tons.
It's what? Oh, right,
Posted
3 tons.
My
So-
daughter modeled that for science fair and came in second place in the
Oh, that's
county.
right, yeah.
So we built a 1:20 scaled model of that bridge.
Nice. That's great.
So it was 2 feet long because the bridge is 40 feet long.
Very cool.
Model was 2 feet long, and we load tested it, and we confirmed that the 3-ton weight posting was the correct posting for that bridge.
Nice project.
So yeah, I know that one very personally.
So I can see with the intersection with Good Road or Good Drive that would possibly be a GPS glitch on the trucker's part, and the results could be ugly, so
Well,
just
They'll
as a
be
good idea.
barricaded.
yeah, Andy, the biggest issue with that, with PennDOT, was the turning lane. Right now, it's a dedicated right and a dedicated left. Anything that we did, PennDOT was concerned that the dedicated right would be impacted. So we looked at a through left, we looked at a dedicated left, a through, and a dedicated right. And ultimately, the cost to improve that intersection, because of the issues that PennDOT wanted to avoid with the dedicated right, were just financially infeasible.
Yeah. This is really, it serves a purpose. Really, this road has no other purpose. Day to day, the residents can take the covered bridge and get out, and it gives us truck access when we need it. That's what makes this a good deal.
At this point in time, originally, Woodcrest Villa was going to have access out to this, which was another reason why going public and having it as a part of the public roadway made sense. But Woodcrest Villa actually approached us because they no longer wanted access. They are finished construction with the portion of Phase 7. And as of about 3 weeks ago, they were done using the maintenance access.
Okay, any other discussion of the board? Okay, anything from the audience, Ms. Garber? Is there anybody even left on Zoom?
A few. And no comments.
Okay, no comments. Okay, so the motion, let me read through this, make sure I get this correct. Motion is to adopt resolution 2020-27 and accept the deed of dedication for the maintenance access for the Woodcrest Villa maintenance access as discussed.
So moved.
Okay, motion for Mr. Railsworth. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second for Mr. Bennett. Mrs. Schweitzer, please poll the board.
Mr. Weaver?
Aye.
Mr. Bennett?
Aye.
Mr. LaFever?
Aye.
Mr. Wigglesworth?
Aye.
Mr. Russell?
Aye, the ayes have it 5-0. We'll move on next to the Comcast Cable Franchise renewal service engagement with Cohen Law Group proposal and engagement letter. And it will be a 2021 budget year working with Mountville and East Lampier. Mrs. Schweitzer, I think you want to take the lead on this one?
Before we jump out of development services, can we take care of the village residential and commercial? action?
I was planning on that last, but we certainly could if we wanted to.
Doesn't matter.
Yeah, so we did have our hearing earlier tonight. We did put into the action items consideration for adopting the village residential and village commercial zoning text amendment as was discussed in the hearing tonight. The reason I requested that motion, just to give a little background, is as I understand it right now, our state legislatures are about to make a pretty drastic change as to what we can and can't do with our agendas in terms of action items. And I wanted to get us in the habit of being legally compliant with what I anticipate is going to be coming in a couple months at this point, which is once we advertise an agenda item, we cannot take action on a non-agenda item unless the board does a formal motion to acknowledge and add it to the agenda. The reason they're trying to do that is to get away from local governments and others from publishing an agenda and then taking action on a whole bunch of things that weren't in the agenda. So what we did as a habit right now about doing a formal motion to add something that was to correct something from our agenda will be something that we're probably going to have to start doing going forward. So I just want to get in the habit of us doing, even if it's not law yet, but it's actually still good practice to do that. And then we're just going to be careful there where we do most of our action items that are not necessarily completely on the agenda, but are on the manager's report is the manager's report. We've done a pretty good job over the years of not taking any action on a non-agenda item.
Right.
With the exception of many times the manager's report, we'll have a couple of things we need to take action on. So we just need to get disciplined on that going forward, that we're going to have a little bit less flexibility with our agendas going forward, and that we're going to have to do some additional steps anytime we wish to add something to the agenda for action, including emergency items. So with that, we did have a motion earlier today, tonight, to add this to the agenda as an action item. And the motion would be to adopt the village residential and village commercial zoning text amendments as presented in the hearing tonight.
And you're adopting ordinance number 2020-04.
2020-24.
04.
04. So ordinance 2020-04. So the motion would be to adopt ordinance 2020-04, which concerns the village residential and village commercial zoning text amendments as discussed tonight. So is there any discussion? No discussion? Okay, I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Okay, motion for Mr. Wigglesworth. Is there a second?
Second.
Second for Mr. Bennett. Mrs. Schweitzer, please poll the board.
Mr. Weaver?
Nay.
Mr. Bennett?
Aye.
Mr. LaFever?
Dang.
Mr. Wigglesworth?
Aye.
Mr. Russell?
Aye, the ayes have it, 3 with 1 nay and 1 abstention. Okay, so we'll move on to the next item of our agenda now, back to the Comcast franchise service agreement with Cohen Law Group, proposal engagement letter. Ms. Schweitzer, if you can go over that and kind of maybe, I'm very familiar with what we're talking about here, but maybe it would not hurt to maybe spend a minute and explain what a franchise agreement is and why we got to go through these steps.
So the franchise agreement with Comcast allows them to use our public right-of-way. We have a 10-year contract with them, and it matures next year. We have used the Cohen Law Group for the past several renewals, and what this proposal is, again, using them to do the renewal process. And I guess it's for their cable poles, wires, fiber optics, anything in the right-of-way. We are going with, the Cohen Group does offer a discount if more municipalities participate. We have Mountville and East Lampeter participating. What I'd like the board to do, if they're willing, this is a 2021 budget item, but to also, in addition to the contract, to also include the auditing this year. I don't think the township has ever done the auditing part of it. It might be a good thing to just get a baseline to see what that looks like.
So everybody's Comcast bill, when you see that little franchise fee on there,
Oh, yeah.
that's a little fee coming back to the township. So that's where that franchise fee comes on everybody's Comcast bill of a couple dollars. So that is in essence, a tax on cable.
How have we contracted with Cohen to date?
I mean, in terms of the wireless facilities ordinance, or
Aren't we talking about the Cohen proposal for next year?
the Cohen Law Group, we only engage them when the contract renews, which is about every 10 years,
So we've had a contract with them.
10 years ago.
Yeah, I wasn't aware if we had a contract or if we were doing it on a per diem, whatever. Okay.
Yeah, they usually reach out to a couple of municipalities that their contracts are renewing to see if they're interested.
I got that part.
Yeah. What I'd like to propose is $9,600 based on their proposal.
What has, we don't have John here or Joe here, but typically that franchise fee is is 100,000 or so.
It's over 100,000, maybe 150. It's been coming down, but there have been some changes in the franchise laws. So it might go back up with a new agreement.
So it is a pretty steady fee that the township gets. It does give residents the false perception that we can somehow regulate the cable industry or regulate their lack of responsiveness when they have a service outage or something like that. They reach out to municipalities wanting to know
Yes.
what we're doing to enforce our franchise agreement with the cable company, and we tell them they really can't do anything.
We do have a contact, and we usually reach out to the contact, and he addresses it then.
But really, this comes down to just, it's a fee for using our right of way.
Mhm.
So any discussion of the board? Okay. Anything on the audience there, Mrs. Garber? And shake his head no. Okay, I'll read the proposal here.
Do we need, regarding the audit, do we need to change the motion at all?
That probably should be mentioned, that you're agreeing to engage the Cohen Law Group for the agreement negotiations as well as the audit for a total of $9,600 in the 2021 budget.
Okay, so the motion would be to accept the Cohen Law Group's proposal to perform the Comcast Cable Franchise Renewal Services agreement and audit, and to authorize the township manager to send the engagement letter to the Cohen Law Group.
There you go.
So moved.
Okay, motion from Mr. Bennett. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second from Mr. Weaver. Mrs. Switzer, please poll the board.
Mr. Weaver?
Aye.
Mr. Bennett?
Aye.
Mr. LaFever?
Aye.
Mr. Wigglesworth?
Aye.
Mr. Russell?
Aye. The ayes have it, 5-0.
Thank you.
Next up, we have the Hempfield Area Fire Service Commission recommendation to provide budget funding to the fire departments of Hempfield, Town, and East Pete. We have a very thorough letter from Mrs. Garber, and I appreciate that. Garber, if you have anything you would like to add, this does seem like a pretty slam dunk, though.
So we had our second Fire Services Commission meeting last week, and we've had very positive meetings so far. But we did have some questions from the fire company as to the money that had been budgeted. And so there was complete agreement across the commission. It was actually Mr. Wigglesworth's idea to distribute it this way so that we do have additional funds should there be an unexpected need. But it would also allow us to help provide some funding right now for the fire departments who are missing their fundraising and other donation funding.
It's a common problem throughout the whole county right now. So is there any discussion items at this point about what's being proposed?
I attended the East Petersburg Fire Company Finance Committee meeting last evening. Very concerned about funding for next year. In October of 19, they sent 400 odd letters to residents of East Hempfield for donations, got 40 back. And the businesses in their jurisdiction box have been good, even a little better, but they're really concerned about their finances going forward, so
Something
will help a little.
we'll take some input from you guys that serve on that commission as we go into the budget with admin and finance. We have over the last couple of years just steadily increased our fire service year after year, including East Pete. So we need to provide fire services. That kind of goes beyond debate. Any other discussions? Mr. Wigglesworth, do you have anything since you're on the commission?
No, just echo what Mrs. Garber said.
Okay.
It's been a good first two meetings, and we're going to get there.
Okay, I'll read the motion. The motion is to recommend the Hempfield Fire Service. Motion.
If you, just
Chairman?
before you, we want to make a change to the motion. So if you could consider motion to accept the recommendation of the Hempfield Area Fire Services Commission providing budget funding to the Hempfield, Roystown, and East Petersburg fire companies in the amount of $10,000 each, and place the remaining budget amount of $30,000 in the Fire Services Capital Fund for future projects.
Appreciate you catching, although I was going to read it that way.
Okay.
It wasn't grammatically correct what was on here. So,
Yeah.
But that is the motion. So do I have a motion?
So moved.
Okay, motion from Mr. LaFever. Do I have a second, Mr. Wigglesworth?
Second.
Second from Mr. Wigglesworth. Mrs. Schweitzer, please poll the board.
Mr. Weaver,
Aye.
Mr. Bennett,
Aye.
Mr. LaFever,
Aye.
Mr. Wigglesworth,
Aye.
Mr. Russell.
Aye, the ayes have it, 5-0.
Thank you.
Next, we have the PennDOT reimbursement agreement authorization to sign and adoption of resolution 2020-28 stating authorization to sign. This is for our Centerville agreement. And Ms. Schweitzer, if you want to start, and I have some color commentary.
You saw this agreement last month or last meeting. It is basically an 80-20 split for final design and construction, or I'm sorry, construction, utility, and right-of-way expenses. This was originally 100% township responsibility for right-of-way and utilities, and it was negotiated down to 20%. And this will then move this project forward to get it designed and built.
Not to confuse everybody on page numbers, it's just another large document and you will go blind trying to read all 90 pages. The most important page to read is page 35 of 90, which is Appendix A, which goes over the cost sharing numbers. And I want to give a little shout out for our manager, who's quickly become very adept at trying to negotiate things with PennDOT. This is a very good deal when you look at what we're getting versus what we're paying. It is not cheap doing the federal aid process. So 80-20 split realistically is really, they're knocking off our costs by about 60%, not 80%. We could have done it a lot cheaper if we were doing it ourselves, but we will still pay a lot more than what we're paying to widen Centerville to 5 lanes and to do the work on Marietta Avenue that's now being proposed. So we are getting a lot of work done, a lot of right-of-way acquisition, ton of utility poles that need to get moved, and we're doing it for roughly just twice the cost of what we paid for the North Centerville Road project, or a much more extensive project. So this has been something that I've been championing since I came on the board 11 years ago, and we're finally getting to where the goal line is starting to become visible. And I'm excited to finally have Centerville Road moving forward with an agreement and getting this one into what's called the let phase and getting it to construction at this point and getting it coming in right after we get done State Road.
Yeah, the let date is next year, but I don't see them having that happen. Yeah.
Yeah, so this is in my mind nothing but good news. It's addressing one of our 2 most congested corridors in the county and putting together a very good game plan that's going to be around for years to come. And it's addressing the continued development pressure that's occurring in Maynard Township to our south. So this is a good deal. So, but for my perspective and your perspective, Exhibit A is what's most important. what we're paying, and that's
Yeah,
what's
you
in
are
there.
committing to Exhibit A.
What page is that again?
It's page 35.
And I don't know why those numbers are so small.
Yeah, they're very hard to read. You gotta do some major
Yeah,
magnifying to see them.
it actually prints that way too.
I don't know where our original budget numbers were, but it wasn't 3.3 million.
It wasn't that high, it was in 2 point something range. But that didn't include Marietta or the, excuse me, the Hemplin cul-de-sac.
Right.
We did expand a bit.
And the original number was actually much higher when it was a $25 million project and not a $13 million project too.
And this agreement actually took a year to get because they wanted to get the right-of-way costs, the utility costs, and make those as accurate as possible, the construction costs, so they don't have to come back and amend it. They probably will anyway, but best effort.
Our original budget number way back when was 20% of a $25 million project. And now we're down to a $16.6 million project.
Right. With our share about 3.3.
So comments of the board. Board comments. Any questions in general at this point about our 15-year process of getting Centerville Road to this point now?
Well done job.
The good news on the third property that we need to take, the gentleman is ready to sign, so that doesn't have to get, go through condemnation.
And we're keeping the dental property now on the corner,
Yeah, that isn't being touched,
which is
to the
amazing that we're
dismay
able
of
to do
the
that.
dentist.
Okay, if there's no comments, and Ms. Garber, is there anybody online that wants to talk about Centerville Road? Yeah, I guess not. So the motion is to adopt resolution 2020-28 and to authorize the chairman or vice chairman to sign the PennDOT reimbursement agreement for Centerville Road widening project.
So moved.
Okay, motion for Mr. Bennett. Is there a second?
Second.
Second for Mr. Weaver. Ms. Switzer, please pull the board.
Mr. Weaver?
Aye.
Mr. Bennett?
Aye.
Mr. LaFever?
Aye.
Mr. Wigglesworth?
Aye.
Mr. Russell?
Aye, the ayes have it 5-0, and
Thank you.
we got a project.
Sweet.
Okay, next up is the Penn Legacy PA Classic Special Events and Roadway Indemnification for September 5th and 6th. Ms. Garber, I assume you're going to run with that?
Yes, I will. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Penn Legacy and PA Classics have now combined, and they have submitted a roadway indemnification agreement and park use request for the Keystone Cup soccer tournament, which will be held across several different locations in Lancaster County on September 5th and 6th. They did not initially expect to need our fields in Amos Herr Park. However, with some of the changes with guidelines and such, they're no longer able to use some of the school fields that they had planned on, et cetera. And so they are now in need of the park fields. But primarily this request is before you for the indemnification agreement due to the use of traffic control on Junction Road for the Junction Road fields. They are requesting some township assistance as they've done in the past. They do have a significant COVID safety plan as required on multiple levels for them, and that was attached for your review. In general, it will not significantly impact the neighbors or otherwise, as the Fall Classic does, as both team size and spectator numbers are significantly decreased by the current guidelines. So it would be our recommendation that you approve Penn Legacy PA Classics application to use the Amos Herr Park fields on September 5th and 6th, 2020, and authorize the chair to sign the roadway indemnification form for the same.
Okay, discussion of the board.
They've behaved when they've been here before?
Yes,
So
thank-
moved.
Ms. Garber did read the motion, but I'll just read it again. Motion to approve the Penn Legacy PA Classic application to use the Amos Hare Park Field on September 5th and 6th, 2020, and to authorize the chairman, vice chairman to sign the roadway identification form or the same. So that's the motion.
For a second or?
Mr. LaFever gave okay, I'm looking for a second then.
Second.
Okay, motion from Mr. LaFever, second from Mr. Wigglesworth. Ms. Switzer, please poll the board.
Mr. Weaver?
Aye.
Mr. Bennett?
Aye.
Mr. LaFever?
Aye.
Mr. Wigglesworth?
Aye.
Mr. Russell?
Aye, the ayes have it, 5-0. We'll now move on to old business. Is there any, there's nothing on our agenda. Is there any old business that needs to be discussed? Okay, seeing none. New business, is there any new business that needs to be introduced? We have nothing on the agenda. Okay, seeing none. Traffic Commission reports. Mr. LaFever?
We had 2 items on the Traffic Commission this evening. One was to approve the proposed signage at Bloomfield in the Landis Farms development. The other was to address the frustration at Shank Mill Road where the covered bridge has been sustaining a lot of abuse, and the resident adjacent, Mr. Gary Longenecker, has asked for help from the township to try to eliminate the damage to his lawn from vehicles that need, for one reason or another, too wide a swing in their travel and other things. He had a proposal to put a one-way yield solution in at 2 directions on the road. We looked at that, we considered other things, and we've asked staff to look at the existing signage on Spooky Nook, try to get it more significant and more direct to discourage truck traffic back into that area. And also to ask McMahon to look at what we might do as far as other things, possibly a designation of a truck route to try and encourage other traffic patterns in the area. So we didn't really get to a conclusion, but we addressed the matter. And that was pretty much what we did.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Beaver. We'll move on to the manager's report. Ms. Switzer.
Just an update on the Church Street paving. I've scheduled some meetings. There's going to be resident meetings on 9/22 and 9/24, property owner meetings. And also there's going to be a coordination meeting of the school on 9/23. So that's moving forward. That's going to be a 2022 project. 2022? I think so. Church Street paving. Yes. 2022. Farmingdale Road, just an update there. I got an update from Chris Bauer. He's still moving along. He's going to be resubmitting the PennDOT permit back to PennDOT for Farmingdale. So that's still moving along. Can't imagine he's going to make his fall deadline, but I'm going to pose that question to him for next meeting. That's all the updates I have, unless there's questions.
Any update on the Holland Street Bridge removal?
No, haven't heard anything from Amtrak.
Any questions of the manager? Okay, seeing none. Okay, we'll move on to public comment for residents and taxpayers of East Hempfield Township. Ms. Garber, is there anybody wishing to express public comment? I see there's like one resident left on our Zoom right now.
There is no request for public comment.
Okay, with that, it is now 9:20, looks like 8 at this point. Yes, you can, Mr. Brent.
Okay. I think we'd be remiss tonight if we didn't commend the East Hempfield or the Hempfield Fire Services and Diane Garber for the work that was done at the Galinsky residence on Centerville Road. They had a tree fall over on their property, on their home actually, and did some significant damage. And we got a great letter from Mr. and Mrs. Galinsky, and I appreciate all the work that was done there. And I commend everyone for a great job.
Yeah, I'm glad you caught that. Thank you, Mr. Bennett. It was a very, not too often we get a 3-page letter thanking us for what our township staff did. And he did in particular commend Ms. Garber for the job that she did helping orchestrate that, which is just awesome. So thank you. So with that, seeing nothing else, it is now on my clock exactly 9:30, and we will adjourn our meeting. And we will go into executive session and not return.